today as we make sure we fight for homes for all right here in Rhode Island. We are at the end of our legislative session, and we need to demand that the Rhode Island General Assembly acts on housing justice this session. It is no secret to anyone in this room that we are in the midst of a housing crisis. Tenants are overburdened by rent, paying between 30 and up to 70% of their annual income just on housing alone, leaving little room for paying for medical care, child care, and life's other basic necessities. It is too hard right now for our families to live inside of our state. The housing workbook just came out this year, and there is only one community in Rhode Island where Rhode Islanders who make moderate income can live, and that's Burrville. Most of our black and brown and low-income communities live right here in Providence. They cannot afford to live in a city that many have called home for generations. 44 million households, roughly 30% of the U.S. housing population, lives in rental housing. Yet, we still do not have comprehensive laws protecting renters. Instead, we have a patchwork of bills that have not been updated since 1986 in our state. It's been too damn long for Rhode Island residents to have their rights respected and outlined in our General Assembly and in our laws. We're here to fight for a rental registry, a statewide rental registry to make sure that all of our housing stock is quality, safe, and affordable, and that we know who owns the units, keeping our families in our state housed. We also need to make sure that we pass a rental application fee. Right now, folks are paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year just to fight for a potential space in a unit because our market is currently overburdened. We're not building enough housing. Rhode Island could be one of the first states to pass a public developer bill, ensuring that we have quality, affordable homes in our core cities, sponsored by Senator Meghan Kallman. We also need to make sure that this year we seal eviction records. Keeping families housed is a priority in our state. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw eviction rates decrease to some of the lowest they've been in over 30 years. But right now, after the moratorium sunset, we've seen over 113% of evictions kick up in the last month, leaving Rhode Island families on the cusp of homelessness. Homelessness and evictions is not just one occurrence. It is a cascade of events that leaves people housing insecure for up to 7 years on their record, increasing the amount of housing security right here in our state. We need to make sure that this session we pass comprehensive tenant-focused legislation and seal evictions, sponsored by myself and Rep. Tansey on the House. Again, our laws are out of date. They haven't been updated since 1986. We need to make sure that we also ban credit report history and criminal background record. No one in our state should be denied housing just because of who they were or how much money they make or where they get their source of income. We need to have a Homes for All guarantee in Rhode Island this legislative session. In order to prevent more homelessness, we also have to make sure we have and ensure a right to counsel for everyone going through eviction court. Because again, eviction is not just an event. It is a cascade of events and consequences, leaving our families, children on the street right here in our communities with loss of income, lower educational outcomes, and a whole host of other significantly negative impacts on their health, their housing, and their futures. We need to make sure that we also have a right to habitability for all of our units, including lead pipe mitigation, increasing our infrastructure, and protecting all of our families from lead poisoning. Because in 2023, lead poisoning should not be a reality for the majority of our families who live in our urban core. We've got a slate of a host of amazing people who have been housing advocates and fighting for the right to housing for all Rhode Islanders. Up next, we will have Senator Meghan Kallman to speak about some of her priority pieces of legislation this session.
Hey everybody, I'm not sure we're allowed to do a chant in here, but I'm going to do it real quick anyway. When I say homes for all, you say homes for all. Homes for all! Homes for all! Homes for all! Homes for all! There we go. Thank you. I'm Meghan Kallman. I am the Senate sponsor of the Create Homes Act, the rental registry, and a handful of other housing development projects particularly. So Senator Mack spoke very eloquently about a number of the tenant protections that we are concerned with this session. I am really interested in housing development because until we have more housing, we are going to feel pinched. So we need to be developing housing at a real quick rate. I am grateful to the support for the support of multiple colleagues, both in my chamber and in the House, for their committed dedication to this issue. But specifically, the Create Homes Act would do a couple of things that Rhode Island currently does not have the capacity to do. So one, it would create a land bank, which means that if there were lands that were in disuse, the state would be able to purchase it at a fair market rate, but then sort of have it at the ready and be able to turn it over faster. It would enable the state to contract with developers, both public and private. It would allow the state to create its own and manage its own housing. And it would also enable the state to sort of purchase and maintain existing multifamily housing. So we got to do a couple of things here. We have to preserve the housing that still exists. We have to make the world fairer for renters, and we have to build more. We have bills in both chambers this session that do both, and I'm just so proud to look out here and see this huge representation of our community who agree that housing is necessary, who are putting in the time and the energy and the heart to make this a reality. Thank you all.
For your relentless advocacy for this. And I also want to shout out some of our other electeds who are in the room also fighting for housing in both of our chambers. Rep. Morales, Senator Cano, Senator Boyer, and Senator Acosta. And Senator Ujifusa as well. And because it's our duty to fight for all of our freedom, our next speaker will be Crystal Barnaby, who's a formerly incarcerated person struggling to find a unit right now.
Being crushed by this housing crisis, and I'm that person that's being crushed. One of the many people in Rhode Island that's being crushed. I've been living in Airbnbs and hotels for the past 6 years. I haven't had stable housing for more than a few months since I entered the system at the age of 14. Now I'm almost 40, and I'm still completely unable to find a stable housing. I cannot express how strongly enough how damaging it is to not have a safe and stable place to live. I made some bad choices when I was younger that led to me in prison. Every time I get out of prison, I want nothing more than to be a responsible citizen and lead a normal life. But every time I am unable to find stable housing, and my efforts crumble, no matter how hard I try. It takes years to get state resources like public housing or Section 8. My record and bad credit score lock me out of most housing options. It feels like there's no way out for me to rehabilitate myself because I can't access a safe and affordable place to live. I'm a hard worker, but it's so hard to maintain a job when I have to worry about paying $500 to $1,000 a week for hotels or Airbnbs. I'm not losing hope, though. We need more sustainable, affordable housing. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal, for those powerful words. Before we call our next speaker, who will be Rep. Cherie Cruz, another champion in the House side fighting for this legislation, I want to remind everyone that we're also here to lobby our elected officials. You're in the people's house. Those are your elected officials. Make sure you take a look at that QR code, find out who your representatives are, and after we finish rallying here, we'll take it to the floors and talk to our elected officials who have the power to make these pieces of legislation reality for Rhode Islanders.
Again, Crystal, for coming forward, and everyone who's been impacted by this housing crisis. Because we are, in fact, in a housing crisis. Yeah. That's right. Where many of our fellow Rhode Islanders are worrying about whether today is the day they will be without a roof over their heads. We're the most vulnerable in our state, working class families, families struggling in poverty, seniors, those with disabilities, our veterans live day by day at the mercy of this housing crisis, living in constant worry. When will this be the day they need to find shelter under a bridge? We can no longer stand by idly and watch as this happens. We can no longer waste our collective voices and strength and say or do nothing. We must stand up, stand alongside our fellow Rhode Islanders to begin to address the devastating impacts and stop the hemorrhaging from this housing crisis. That's why we're here today, to advocate for bold and creative solutions. Can I hear Homes for All? Homes for All! That's right. The work is beginning here at the State House, as you heard so many speak of. Legislation such as reducing barriers to accessing housing with banning rental application fees. That's right. Okay, so right now, sealing past eviction records. That's right. Some records that can date back as far as 20 years, holding people hostage. And funding bold and creative ideas through legislation such as the Create Homes Act that would make Rhode Island the first state in the country with a state-level public housing developer. Can I hear That's right, we have an opportunity. We desperately need this, but we're not going to solve this crisis with attitudes such as, this is the way it's always been done. The way it has always been done is one reason why we're here in this housing crisis. That's right. We have a unique opportunity to end the way things have been done that has gutting us to this place. Opportunities such as this state-level public housing developer. We have the power to begin to alleviate the further hardships to families in our state. Our collective voices and actions can get us there. We have to stay the course and continue to advocate and do the work alongside fellow community members, our champion legislators, and state leaders to ensure that we do not stop in working on creative solutions and bold actions to get this done and ensure that every Rhode Islander has access to quality housing. So let's get this done. Homes for all. Homes for all.
Thank you, Cherie, for all the work that you do for families right here in Rhode Island, especially low-income families. Up next, we'll have June Speakman. There's a host of other pieces of legislation that are not just to keep people in their homes and keep people from facing homelessness, but to also make sure that every single unit in our state is quality. No one should get sick living in an apartment. It is a public health crisis when we have families that are sick from lead, mold, mice, and other pests in their units. Our Rhode Island General Assembly needs to act now to make sure that homes are medicine as well.
Hey everyone, for decades, federal, state, and local governments have abdicated their responsibility to provide this fundamental human need, which is housing. It is heartening this year to see so many policymakers working on creative solutions to deal with the housing crisis, and so many advocates here joining us today and on many other days this session. So thank you for all your work. I want to talk about one piece of legislation that hasn't yet been mentioned, although I am in full support and co-sponsoring on most of what has been mentioned, and that is the revolving fund. It is great to make zoning accommodate multifamily housing, and it is great to set up a public developer, but you cannot build housing without money. And Reclaim has helped me develop a new funding mechanism. It's a revolving fund. It is, if you had 5 hours to read the article in the New York Times on Sunday about Vienna, you will understand a little bit of it. It is also a model from Montgomery County in Maryland, and we're going to try to set it up here, which will provide a consistent funding stream to do the development and build all of these units that we need to meet the needs of Rhode Islanders. Thank you.
Thanks for your years of advocacy, June. Up next, we will have Province Organization of Workers and Renter, or POWER, speaker, Tiara Mack.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiara Mack. I've lived in Providence my whole life and have 2 young sons. We've been renting on Lawn Street from Terri to Jesus for 6 years. A few months ago, I joined Providence Organization of Workers and Renters, POWER, who have been standing with me and my family in our support for justice. Like a lot of Rhode Islanders, I've been paying hidden penalties. There are unsafe conditions that led to poisoning my son. and a long list of code violations that have not got fixed yet. There's drafty windows, musty cupboards, broken railings, mold, mushrooms growing out of the floor. Then there's the stress of trying to find safe and healthy, affordable housing. And the insults and intimidation I've endured for standing up for myself and my family. My son was lead paint poisoned by Mr. DeJesus, most likely when he decided to do some renovations in my apartment, being rushed, and efforts to sell the house. Without providing legal notice, he sent repair crews out to rip the apartment bathroom and also the kitchen. All the while, Terri DeJesus has been doing well for himself, flipping houses all over the city. He sold multiple buildings in the last few years, including a house on the east side for over $1 million. Despite that he's being cited to the city for 20 code violations and being fined daily for the substandard conditions I'm living with, he has not done what the city has asked him to do.
Shame! Shame!
Instead of verbally abusing me over the phone, led to lies on social media. 2 weeks ago, the Department of Children and Youth and Families was sent to my home on baseless, anonymous tips, including the same false accusations that were made on my Facebook page. He's trying to retaliate against me for organizing and joining the tenant movement, but I have people supporting me, and I'm strong. Through building our house, we are going to get justice and a safe house for my family and all working class families. Thank you.
The daily decision to put a roof over your and your family's head should not come with, should I live with mice today? Should I live with mold today? Our families should not have to make decisions about their health or housing. Every single unit in our state should be quality and affordable for our families. Up next, we're going to have Earl who's a former Pioneer tenant, someone else who knows what it's like to live in substandard units.
Hello, I'm Earl. I am a working class citizen, truck driver. I come here just because as a working class citizen, I'm pretty sure a lot of people feel the same way. It feels as if we have no protection. We have to live in lead-filled homes. If we try to stand up for ourselves, you can easily get kicked out of your home. And if you can't leave the home because you can't find a place to live, because there is housing applications that cost you $50 to hundreds of dollars. You can get hit with an eviction. I was one of the lucky people who was able to find a home before something like that would happen. There's not too many people who can find a home right now. Everything is outrageously expensive, even for someone who makes $20, $30, $40, $60, $70,000 a year. So that's why we need to have these bills passed. We need to have lead-free homes. We need to have the application fees go away. We need to have eviction records sealed. And most importantly, we need to have public housing. We need to have homes for all. Because if we try to sit and wait for the system to repair itself like everyone tells us to, it's only going to get worse.
Yep.
Homes for all.
Homes for all!
These stories are so powerful and important, and each of you in this room have a story that you need to make sure that you tell to our elected officials upstairs right after this rally ends. Take a look at that QR code. Make sure you know who your elected official is. But honestly, talk to anyone who's in those chambers, because it takes all of us knowing that these are priorities and that homes for all, it should be a right to all Rhode Islanders. Up next, we will have Justin Kelly from the Painters Union.
How you doing, everybody? My name is Justin Kelly. I'm the business representative and political director for the Painters and Allied Trades here in the state of Rhode Island, as well as the chairman for the Rhode Island Building Construction Trades Organizing Committee. Represent collectively over 10,000 members here in the state, skilled craftspeople. I come here today to tell you we have your back. and we stand in solidarity with you. The reality is poverty, homelessness are policy choices. Those things are choices that people make. They make those choices for their benefit at our expense. And because they're choices, the reality is that we can make a different choice. And that's what we want to say today. Let's make that different choice. Let's go ahead and take that step. That step that might be a little bit scary for some of the elected officials here. That might be a little bit scary for some in the business community. But I'm here to tell you, you'll be all right. You're going to be okay. You're still going to be all right. You're still going to make profit. The state's not going to collapse if we make these choices. And in fact, the state's going to do better. Everybody's going to do better. But in a world, in a country where we have more wealth than at any other time in human history and in any other place in the entire world, it's not just a choice, it's a crime that people are sleeping on the streets. It's a crime that in 2023 in Rhode Island, any child would be poisoned by preventable lead poisoning. It's a crime that we're going to work over 40 hours a week, 40 hours a week, or whatever, any hours a week, and you're going to live in poverty. So don't wait. Don't wait for legislation to pass. Don't wait for policy to change. Organize yourself. Organize your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your neighbors. Organize yourself in your community. Organize yourself where you rent, where you live, and organize yourself on the job. And when you do that, when you make that choice, you will become powerful. You will become unstoppable. Because the same people that are slumlords across this state and across this country are bad employers, are bad developers, are people who exploit other people on the job. And so we have, collectively, as the state of Rhode Island, a choice to make this session, this legislative session. Are we going to continue to tolerate homelessness? No. Are we going to continue to tolerate poverty? No. Are we going to continue to tolerate wage theft? No. Unsafe working conditions for construction workers? No. Low wages and lack of benefits? No. Particularly for immigrant workers, for people of color, for people who are formerly incarcerated? Nope. I don't want to. My union doesn't, and the 10,000 members of the building trades don't. Because there's another choice to be made. And that choice is to have a model of building public housing again. To say we want to build not only a great place to live, we want to ensure the workers who are building that are being paid a living wage, a prevailing wage, something where we can create a sustainable cycle of benefit, not an unsustainable cycle of poverty and exploitation. So, I'll say this to close, stick with it, and don't forget to take it easy, but take it.
Yes, getting a public developer in Rhode Island will not just ensure that we are getting our climate goals here in Rhode Island, it'll make sure that we're having environmentally friendly places for our tenants who are overburdened by asthma rates in our communities. We'll also make sure that we are paying a prevailing wage, because again, no one should live in poverty while we are building quality and affordable homes right here in our state. Up next, we'll have Terri from Rhode, who's been in this fight for many years.
Woo! Go Terri!
Hi, thank you. I'm Terri Wright, and I just have a question to ask. How many of you rent? How many tenants do we have here? Well, guess what? Because I rent, none of us are protected. So today, someone got evicted, maybe 30 days from now, it could be you. your family, friends. There are no tenant protections. This is an opportunity. We have an opportunity to lessen the poverty rate that is growing in low-income communities, in every community now, due to landlords and property owners raising rents astronomically high, not keeping their properties up to code, and we really want to mitigate present and future harm to tenants and families.
Yeah.
A rental registry will ensure that all rental properties are safe and healthy for tenants, and that the housing is up to state regulated code. And that's very important because housing is health, and housing should not make anyone sick. Also, my favorite is eviction expungement. Eviction ceiling. I wondered, when was the first eviction ever? And I'm not going to ask, but it was a trail of tears and a removal of indigenous people. So you're thinking how far back that is? Well, I'm thinking and I'm asking, in the state and the city files, I'm just wondering what's the oldest eviction that's sitting there preventing some individual or their families from being rehoused? Like, how long ago did that take? Did that happen? It just makes you think. This housing crisis, it didn't grow overnight, but a lot of neglect was put into what we see here today. Housing is a human right.
Yes, it is.
And I do believe, like everyone here, in homes for all. Also, application fees will prohibit landlords and property owners from charging fees to renters in search of truly affordable housing options. Passing this bill and banning rental application fees will protect low-income families and individuals, from being taken advantage of, and the greed and capital intake of such rental application fees from causing further hardship, of which vary in price from $50 and up. Because about 20 years ago, I paid $100 to my best friend in Philly for an application fee, and we didn't receive the apartment. So again, it's time to change the game. It's time to change how we do housing in the state of Rhode Island. It's time to care for one another. It's time to treat tenants and their families the same as you would treat a homeowner, someone with a lot of money. We're all the same here. There's no one above anyone. Tenants need protections. And without tenant protections, this housing crisis is going to grow. And if you think the emergency rooms, doctors are exhausted, the police station, their officers are exhausted, homeless, unsheltered people are exhausted. It'll only get worse if this important legislation is not passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Terri. And before we welcome up our last speaker, tonight, the Senate Judiciary Committee committee will be hearing all of this important legislation tonight right here in the State House in room 313, including bills to make sure that there's 120 days notice of rental increase, the sealing of eviction records, interest on security deposits, eviction 4% rent cap, and a host of other legislation being heard right here. It is our duty to make sure that we fight for our freedoms and for the freedoms of everyone else in our state. Last up on our agenda, we have Yanine Guardia, who's with Reclaim.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. I know this is also like an awkward time. People's schedules this week on a Tuesday at 3. So again, thank you to everyone who came out. We are keeping the ones who couldn't make it in our hearts and minds. Thank you to all the speakers before me. I'm the last one, but mine's also a little bit more meatier, so hopefully we can still be pumped, right? And again, thank you especially to tenants and the legislators that came out. We are gathered here today in support of historic investments in housing production and affordability, because we believe that everyone has a right to a home, and we believe that our fight is for the state of Rhode Island to respect and guarantee that right. In 2021, Rhode Island increased housing supply by only 1,150 units, which ranked last in the nation on a per capita basis, according to the most recent Rhode Island Foundation report. Reducing the red tape holding up development is important, but we need to proactively build out a state-level system to solve the problem. And that's why Rhode Island needs a state-level public housing developer. Yeah. That's also why public housing authorities need to be supported to take the lead role in building the homes Rhode Islanders need to solve the housing crisis. We are on the cusp of making history here in Rhode Island and winning the first state-level public housing developer in the nation. I moved out when I was 16 years old. By the time I took shelter into my own hands, I had moved at least 9 different times between Kentucky, Central Falls, and Cumberland. I remember my mom saying, where did all the 3-bedroom apartments for $800, right? Well, we're about 10 years too late for that, right? As you can see from the market. Luckily, my mom at the time got assistance, but it was hard to move around with 3 little girls. My mother's story is not that unique in the low to very low income community. Imagine other single parents, Rhode Island families experiencing similar instability. We cannot rely on the private market to rent us apartments that are affordable on the wages we earn. Why? Because rent depends on the landlord's affordability of their mortgage. And what they can't afford, we pay as rent. The banks are not going to help us. The private housing market is not going to help us. We must advocate for progressive solutions. There are 2 key pieces of legislation that will put the public sector in a position to start leading on solving this crisis. Senator Meghan Kallman for Senate Bill 866 would create a land bank so that the Department of Housing can assemble unutilized publicly owned land to develop housing. Land is one of the most expensive factors in the real estate development. All available publicly owned land should be consolidated into a land bank so that homes that Rhode Islanders need can be built. Halfway there. Senate Bill 866 would also give the State Department of Housing the powers and capacities to acquire already existing affordable housing to ensure its preservation. Preservation, please. Too much of the state's naturally occurring affordable housing that is relatively affordable but unsubsidized by any government program, is in deplorable conditions. Rife with lead, leaks, rodents, sewage. It sucks, and much is also at risk of being flipped by speculators and turned into housing for higher income people. It's critical that the Department of Housing acquire such properties to preserve them as safe and permanently affordable housing owned by either the state, public housing authorities, or nonprofits. It is important that the public sector steps up and builds homes for the for-profit. Let me repeat that. It is important that the public sector steps up and builds homes that the for-profit sector can't and won't. Rep. June Speakman's House Bill 6168 would create a public housing developer financed by a revolving fund to build own mixed income housing directly for in partnership with local public housing authorities. Shout out public housing authorities. Because across Rhode Island, they're ready to build and contribute to ending the housing crisis. Lastly, we believe that it's key that construction workers build this generation of public housing and are paid prevailing wages at full Davis-Meakin rates. Yes. Publicly developed housing will be a major benefit to the state's economy, particularly if we enter another recession. Side-eye. The public investment should pay workers good wages because it's the right thing to do and because it will act as a stimulus during a recession. Last bar. We also believe that housing design and construction must be accountable to important building energy standards, thanks to other existing laws like the Green Buildings Act and the 2021 Act on Climate, ensuring that people are able to live in healthy, efficient homes as the state moves towards meeting its climate goals. We don't know what the future will be, but we sure can secure shelter for it. Thank you.
Go talk to your representatives and senators now.